her first question is, what are your thoughts on people with adult content pages? So I actually think this is a really good question, and it's an important question to discuss right now, because right now porn is it's everywhere. Like, porn is so big right now. This is something that my opinion has changed on a lot this year, because if you go down to some of my older videos, it might take too long to find it. So if you want later, you can literally just like type it in the search engine. Pranzata, is the porn industry immoral? I think that's what it is. So Pranzata, is the porn industry immoral? I made that last year. Back then, my opinion was that it's totally fine. Like, I'm going to be honest. I've always been a porn user since I was old enough to masturbate. Like, I'm pretty sure I started watching porn since I was like 12 or something like that. So because it was such a normal routine or part of my life, I never thought of it as anything weird or bizarre or abnormal. It wasn't really till this year that I started seeing it as a negative thing for me. And I'm at the point now where I'm seeing it as a negative thing for everybody. I think it's negative for the people watching it. I think it's negative for the people doing it. And I think it's a negative thing for is there a third one? And there might only be two. Okay. I think so forget the three. I think it's for two. I think it's a negative thing for the people consuming it. And I think it's a negative thing for there is a third, for society. Okay. So let me break this down. The people watching it, the people creating it, and for society as a whole, I think it's not a good thing. Back when I made that video last year, my opinion was that, it's everybody does it. Who gives a fuck? I think my perspective at that time was like, I saw it as just an aid for a sexual fantasy, which I don't. I think sexual fantasy is healthy and normal. I think even if you're in a relationship or whatever, I think sexual fantasies and having fantasies about other people or other things or whatever, I actually think that's a healthy thing. I think, in my opinion, most sexual fantasies are your brain trying to work out a psychological issue. So for example, I know this is an extreme example, but let's say you're a woman who had been sexually abused, but you're having sexual fantasies about being sexually abused. What the hell is that? That's very common. I think, in my opinion, that might be your psychology trying to work out the control that you felt you lost. And it might be a way of trying to take back the control. Okay, maybe if this, was something that I wanted, then it wouldn't have been something that happened to me. It's something that I'm doing. Things like that. And by the way, I speak as I don't mean to sound insensitive and speak for people in that situation. I speak that of someone who's a woman who's been through things like that. So it's, coming from the horse's mouth, like I said before. I think that sexual fantasies are good and healthy and normal. So in the past, I always viewed sexual content as just an aid to those sexual fantasies. I never saw it as a big deal. It wasn't until recently that I started to see it as well, wait a second. These are real people. These people in these videos are real people. To me, I might feel detached from it because it's just I'm just fantasizing and masturbating. But I'm wait a second. These are actual people with stories and histories. And it really started to make me think deeper about it. Not only that, but I might get to this a little more later. But I think this is a very important conversation to have right now, because we're transitioning into a period where things are becoming, virtual reality is becoming reality. We're becoming so technical and so in our phones that what once was a porn magazine is now I don't even know where the lines are anymore. How do you differ? Okay, I feel like my brain's jumping all over the place and I can't finish the sentence. I apologize about that. Okay, so for example, there was a Black Mirror episode where they kind of pointed out what I'm talking about. There was a Black Mirror episode where there was a man who was in a marriage and in a family, and there was a virtual reality video game that he was playing where it was so real that basically he was the character and he was having a sexual relationship with another character. And I think I started getting triggered during that because like I've been cheated on before, and there's been cheating, in my family history. So cheating, the topic of cheating is very triggering for me. And I remember I couldn't even finish the episode because it like really kind of shook me up. Like it made me realize, like, if we're evolving into this society that is virtual, well, how do you differentiate between like what is actually having a relationship with somebody? Like if there's like a virtual reality having sex with somebody, how do you, like, at what point and at what line is that real if everything is becoming virtual? You know what I mean? So that's like a whole nother issue, and it's kind of getting away from the original question you just asked me. So I don't know if I want to even get into that, but I do want like people to think about that because that's actually, that's interesting. But to get back to the original question, why do I think it's bad now, or like a negative thing? I think, okay, for one, for the consumer, I think it's bad for two reasons. For one, I think it's like kind of like a quick dopamine fix. Like I think it's no different than picking up your phone and over scrolling things. Like I think it's like, or eating fast food or eating junk food. Like I think it's kind of like, I think a lot of people go to porn to deal with emotional issues, and rather than actually dealing with the issues, they just kind of look for something to distract themselves, and it's like a quick dopamine fix. So I think for that reason, for me in particular, like I noticed that in the past I was using it for those reasons, to kind of deal with stress, and rather than actually tackling the stress. So that's one reason I don't think it's good, and it becomes addicting for that reason. Looking back, I think I was kind of addicted to it as well, because I would notice it would like really distract me. Secondly, I would say it's bad for the consumer. I would say more in particular for men than women, probably, because I think there's a lot of men out there now that, because we are transitioning into such a virtual reality, that and after the pandemic too, like a lot of kids, like a lot of teenagers were, at home and doing Zoom lessons and Zoom classes. I think a lot of people are losing the ability to communicate with other people. So I think that pornography is making it harder for men to actually learn how to communicate with women, because why go through the trouble of learning how to communicate with people when you can just get your needs met online easily? And I think it's a short-term solution. Like it might feel good in the moment, but I think in the long term, it's just creating more loneliness. Like in particular for men. Women are always going to get laid no matter what. So like I think women, if they watch porn, they're still going to get laid in real life too. So I think, for men this is more true, but I don't think it's a good thing to rely on porn to get those needs met, because you're just not developing the skills you actually need to communicate with real people. So I do feel like sympathetic for young people who watch a lot of porn or are addicted to porn, because I feel like they're kind of robbing themselves of the experience to build a real connection with a human being, Secondly, I would say, like, going back to I don't think it's good for the people creating it. I feel like at a first glance, you might think it's empowering for the women who are creating it, especially nowadays, in a situation where you can just make your own page and all the funds go to you. Like maybe in the past, it was very clearly not empowering for women, because a lot of women would make these videos and all the profits would go to like these porn pimps, like the men at the top who would make all the money in their company. I think now women are able to create their own content, which at first glance, it seems empowering, right? Like it's like, oh wow, now women can take control. But still at the end, it's like they're placing their value on, they're selling their sexuality. And I don't think sexuality is something that should be taken lightly. I think that's a mistake we are making today as a society, and that's a whole nother thing. Like I don't even want to get too far into that, but I don't really see in the long term, how do I phrase this? Yes, in the short term, you're taking control and you're financially supporting yourself and you're making money, and that's empowering. But in the long term, are you really going to find satisfaction with that within those financial gains you're making if you're doing that by selling your sexuality, which I believe is something special? Like, I don't know. How is that going to really make you feel in the long run, And not only that, but for the people who are like, yeah, but I'm supporting these women who can't feed their children. True. You know what I mean? Like if there's a situation where a woman is desperate for financial resources and this is the only way she can get it, I don't want to like take that away from somebody if that's the way. But at the same time, it's like, if we really feel sympathetic for these women, shouldn't we just give them money without expecting them to show us their tits? Like, you know what I mean? Like if I'm like, oh my God, this poor woman can't feed her kids. Like, show me your tits and then I'll help you feed your kids. Why don't we just like have a better solution where we actually take care of the poor, and then that won't be the solution? You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. I thought about that. And then for society as a whole, I think it's desensitizing us from these things, from these questions. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people say porn is normal. And I said that last year in the video, that I thought it was normal. I'm like, yeah, porn is normal. What are you talking about? But I'm starting to realize now that just because something's normal doesn't mean it's good. Like, you know, so I don't know. That's my take on it. And by the way, cock-a-noodle, I sincerely apologize if you're somebody who has adult content and you're going to be on my podcast and everything. I don't want you to take that as like I disapprove of you personally. One of my goals on this podcast is to be able to discuss these issues and still have love and respect for each other. So if we disagree on that, I'm really sorry. I still want to show you nothing but love and respect, regardless of our differences and opinions, you know? I mean, to a degree with some people though, like if some people's like evil, like not you, I'm talking about like different situations. Like if I have a podcast guest that I like clearly after talking to them thinking they're partaking in some sort of evil, like, yeah, I'm not going to necessarily show my respect for that person. But I'm just saying in general, when good, decent people have differences of opinions, I want to be able to walk out of that situation with love, respect, and understanding for the other person's perspective. And by the way, I understand the perspective of having adult content because I've been in a situation where I thought of doing that myself. Like I've been in a lot of financial debt, and there has been times in my life where I'm like, maybe I should just be a stripper, like, and I would pay off all my student loan debt. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even saying my opinion's correct. I could be totally wrong. And I understand the other side of things as well. But right now, my opinion is leaning towards, I do think that pornography is a negative thing for society. And, you know, the whole thing about like, is it cheating when virtual reality is becoming reality? That's like a whole nother topic that I don't want to get into, but it's something that I think as a society we need to talk about, because clearly we're heading in the direction of virtual reality. So as that's happening, I do think clear lines need to be created about those things before we get there, or else relationships are going to be ruined left and right. You know, I mean, they kind of already are in some cases, but you know what I mean. Okay, 2 more questions.